Thank you for joining me for another CEO barbecue. My name is Antonio, and today I'm going to Idaho. It will be West Central Idaho, really on the border with Oregon. And joining me on the barbecue today is Dean Besserer, the CEO of Zeus Mining Corp. Not before I've warned you that we have received no monetary compensation for the production of this video from the company that's being interviewed, but you should still understand that this channel is a business that sells content producing services to companies, which means that they might pay us in the future. And it also means you cannot rely on this video for research, and you should treat this as advertisement, not as research. Research is conducted by reading the company's official filings, which you can find on setterplus.ca. Also, please only watch this if you know what you're doing. This interview is intended only for experienced junior mining speculators because mineral exploration, development, and mining is a very tough business where failure is the norm. This is going to be a conversation that is general and impersonal in nature, containing forward-looking statements. I am not a licensed financial advisor, so before continuing on, please talk to an investment advisor with a good long-term track record because your capital is at risk, and I am neither a licensed financial advisor nor do I have a good long-term track record to begin with. If you're not 100% sure you understand 100% of what was just said and written on your screen, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said herein. That was said, Zeus is listed as, well, Zeus, so ZEUS on the Canadian Securities Exchange, where an average of just about 6,000 shares trade daily. Their 52-week high is 50 cents and their 52-week low is 17 cents. With a market cap of about 10 million Canadian dollars and about 60 million shares outstanding, today this is a 17-cent stock. So it is right there at that 52-week low right now. The number of fully diluted shares here is almost 94 million, with about 32 million warrants and almost 3 million options outstanding. And the majority of the warrants are exercisable at 15 cents, with some at 6 cents and then some other at 35 cents too. That all means that an increase of almost 60% in shares outstanding can be expected if all options and warrants get exercised, which would then result in about a 37% ownership dilution if, that's always a big if, but if those options and warrants actually get exercised, which would, of course, then also bring in some money for the company as well. Insider ownership here is recorded at about 10%, although I do intend on finding out more about that later on in the conversation, as this is a newly renamed and a newly reformed company, if you will, but we'll talk about that as well. The effective date on the last officially filed interim financial statement is July 31st. So before I start going through it, I'll caution viewers and listeners that this is now 6 months ago. So a new one should be available rather shortly. But going with what is available to me right now at the time, so on July 31st, the company had about $500,000 recorded as current assets, $320,000 of which, again, at the time was recorded as cash and cash equivalents, with, of course, some prepaid expenses and amount receivables on top of that. But later on September 9, which will be recorded in the next financial statement, Zeus closed a $1.5 million financing. So do keep that in mind as well. On the other side of the July balance sheet, I see a $1 million account payable and no long-term debt as far as I'm aware. The 3 months that ended on July 31st this year had just under $500,000 recorded as operating expenses, although that includes a small portion of a share-based payment as well. Subtracting that gives me an average monthly expense of about $155,000 per month on what I would call G&A. The largest chunk of that expense for that period was investor relations and marketing fees, which represented about 63% of the total cost here. Coming in second were the professional consulting and management fees combined, which then accounted for 23% of the total spent. And then there's some smaller expenses on here, as you can probably see on your screen right now as well. As to the exploration and evaluation expenses, this is where I typically break that down as well. But do note that Zeus just started up its exploration campaign in 2024. So there's been no drilling. There's been a lot of surface work done. And again, stuff that we'll talk about later on in the conversation. But this also means that I won't be able to provide the drilling to marketing ratio or the exploration to administration ratio as I normally do. But again, hopefully the financial side will become more clear further on in the conversation. And if you're watching this conversation sometime in the future, again, go to setterplus.ca and look at their financials because, and again, a quick reminder, I'm not infallible. I might be making mistakes in my reading and or interpretation of these numbers. And this is just one quarter from the past that we're talking about. So it's not necessarily representative of what's going on or what is going to happen in the future. So again, setterplus.ca, make sure you're getting the full picture. And for Zeus, that full picture is now fully focused on Idaho, as far as I understand it. Their flagship asset is called Cuddy Mountain, and Idaho has recently been top of mind for many of us as Hercules Metals, previously called Hercules Silver, stumbled really onto a rather impressive porphyry discovery, discovering a new porphyry belt in the United States, right to the southwest from Zeus's land package, which also kicked off a bit of a staking frenzy, if you will, first by Hercules themselves, but then that resulted in Barrick and Rio Tinto now holding a significant foothold in the region as well. Again, as you can probably see on your screen right now, which is something Dean and I will hopefully touch upon later in the conversation. But first things first, I feel like I've been talking for long enough and people want to hear me shutting up. So, Dean, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure is all mine, of course. And but this is your first time on the CEO barbecue, so obligatory questions are in order. Who are you, and why would I trust you with my money?
Yeah, so my name's Dean Besser. I'm a geologist. I've got about I guess now, well, I guess I'm approaching 30 years in the business. As I was about 22 years in the consulting business, where most of that I owned part of a consulting firm called Apex Geoscience. So during my tenure there, I was the managing director with offices in Australia, South America, and Canada. And, we worked all over the world. So I guess my claim to fame in the geology world is I've worked in over 55 countries, that being either running programs or being the QP for programs, doing 4311s, et cetera. And then I left Apex to come on the public market side, and I'm not sure why, but I did. I loved my time at Apex, but it was it's a lot of people management, and so I wanted to come on the public company side and see how that goes. But part of that was that we really find projects that really have a chance of being something or something that we can sort out fairly quickly. So that fast forwards to Cuddy Mountain, that fits into that mold, and that's why we're in Idaho right now.
Hmm. This kind of seems to be the consensus when someone asks me, "What do you do?" and then I start explaining that I'm in junior mining. Then it's kind of like, and then I arrived in junior mining for whatever reason. No one really knows how or why they arrive in this sector, but we're all in this together. Um, the insider ownership is listed as 10% on your presentation. How much of that is you personally, and what's the average price that you paid for those shares?
Yeah, so when we took over Zeus, it was an existing mining shell called Umdami Exploration. We more or less we bought the shell from some guys. So there was some 8-cent paper that we purchased off book to take over the shell, and then our first financing was at 10%. So between that, I personally bought all the escrowed stock in the shell because the cheap paper that they had when they listed the shell gets a 3-year escrow. So I bought all the remaining escrowed stock, which was somewhere around 900,000 shares, and then uh, and then I put in a large chunk of money into the financing as well. So and the second financing as well, and well, I can get so my insider ownership personally somewhere around 4%, I think.
Okay. And then your average cost would be somewhere between 8 and 10 cents.
Yeah, well, let's say 10 cents for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How big of a position is Zeus in your personal portfolio now after a career of what you said is 30 years? And how important is that investment to you?
Oh no, it's my biggest position in anything that I own. Uh, part of the idea of coming to the junior mining market world is to the reason, well, I guess the reason why I left Apex was and to come on the junior mining side was I want to be, when I make a discovery, I want to be, one of the people that wins along with the shareholders. So the only way you can do that is to have a substantial amount of shares. And if you don't, then it's really just becomes I guess what people call a lifestyle company. And then you look for projects that go on forever and never really find anything. So that's not really what we're interested in. I'm too old for that, and I want to find mineral deposits and move on with life. So,
I think you need to spend more time in Vancouver because I thought you're supposed to make money off of your paychecks and bonuses and enjoy the conference trips.
well, I can tell you, I've never got a bonus in my life. So, if somebody's giving them, maybe they should call me.
You're I see that you're a director and a consultant to a few other companies. I wrote down a few North Valley Strategics, USHA, and then American Potash, or I might be mispronouncing some of these names, but um, how much of
The
your time?
first three, no. Um,
No longer.
no, so when I was, I did, no, I mean, I was the QP for Usha only because friends of mine were vending a project to them, which fell through. But I have nothing to do with that company. So if they list me, then that's unfortunate. What were the other ones?
Oh, I find it actually on Stock Watch, but it's American Potash. I saw
So
your.
American Potash, so I was the interim president and CEO
Mhm.
of that. Basically brought on by friends of mine to help clean up the board and bring on a proper CEO, which I've done.
Yep.
And I've stayed on as the CFO, the the COO, um, until such time as it gains traction to be able to do something significant, which is on the precipice of now.
Yeah, I spoke to Simon actually a couple of weeks ago. Who you brought in? Then I suppose Umdoni exploration is what I saw in here.
Yeah,
Um,
that's Zeus. So that's the
yeah,
shell that
yeah, yeah.
became Zeus.
That's what I thought I couldn't pronounce, but that's what I was going to say is that you changed the name earlier last year. You changed it to Zeus. But so the
That's
point is essentially all of your time is devoted to Zeus. That's what you do full time. That's basically your life.
yeah, it's 85% of my time for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. One more question, and we're done with what I call the smell test before we get into the actual barbecue. Do you or any of the other team members either directly or indirectly own a royalty on the project?
No, I don't so I mean, I guess we'll get into this, but the underlying group that vended the project into Zeus, I act as the geologist for them, but I don't own any portion of that. I'm basically their resident geologist, so those guys have a royalty that doesn't include me.
They're
Yeah.
not involved in Zeus right now, though.
Well, they are as shareholders, so
Yeah.
those guys are major shareholders. But so that's my staking syndicate. I guess that when times are quiet, we get on the we I get in my truck, I go try to find projects, and it's a group of friends that some are financiers, some are geologists, and they help fund me to get projects for them, and then they vend them.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
but the point was that they're not involved in the management of the company. What I'm
no,
trying to figure out, kind of with these smell test questions, if you will, is really your as an investor. For me, it's really important to figure out what's my counterparty's incentive. So, what is your and the management incentive to run this thing? And that's why I was asking how significant of an investment Zeus is to you. And so that's where I'm coming from with these questions, Dean. Let's
yeah.
do talk about the property though. How is it that you have it in the first place, given the spike in staking? I know you staked it before that, but the rocks were still there even before Hercules found it. So how did nobody stake it before you?
Yeah, so I mean, we staked three projects in Idaho, primarily for silver. So similar to Hercules Silver, this area has a number of high-grade silver showings through it. So our property, and you could see the shape at the time, we would stake to specifically try to include some of those historic showings, and that's why it was staked primarily as a silver project, not knowing it was maybe considered to be a VMS belt, but nobody thought that there was a porphyry belt at the time. And so we staked it for the exact same reasons that Hercules did, for the high grade showings, silver showings in the rhyolites. Um, And similar with our other two projects, which one of them has some copper mineralization, but they were both primarily staked as silver art projects as well.
Mm,
So so we staked that and with the idea that maybe we would do something with Hercules at the time to amalgamate our land package, or to make a silver company. And obviously everything's changed. This is not a conventional porphyry type system, so this thing doesn't stick its head out, and that's why it wasn't discovered. Also considering there's about 600 meters of younger volcanics sitting on top of it. So.
mhm. Well, looking at some of the rocks that you've also discovered since then through mapping, it seems like there still might be potential for an epithermal system acting on top, and that's something I hope we can talk about, or not. I mean, I'm not a geologist, so I might be talking out of my back door here. But how did has someone tried to take it off your hands already? I mean, did someone come knocking on your door after Hercules made that discovery?
Well, I mean, I guess there's a few players in the district, but like everyone, we've had multiple meetings with all the strategics, the obvious ones, Barrick, Rio, Ivanhoe, South 32, Antofagasta, Tech. We've had meetings with all of them. So a number of those guys are in the data room right now as we're just about to release our results. So um, that's kind of where we're at with that. But we haven't got to the negotiation stage set with any of those guys, but it's totally possible.
Hmm. That's just the dynamics of that whole district and how that staking rush happens is very interesting to me. It's reminding me of some of the other, although this was pretty big. I mean, in terms of hectares being staked and the time they got staked at was pretty quick.
Yeah, well, Barrick started staking with the helicopter, and we'd already like you had alluded to earlier. We'd staked our ground in 2021, so as a silver project. So we didn't have any competition, and then we obviously considered staking more ground, but seemed to us obvious that Hercules would already have staked around us, which they did. They basically enveloped us to the north in that favorable geology package. And then, Barrick came in and staked. Well, they were still staking for about 13 months that we know of. But you have to consider that a lot of that area. So the other factor for staking for us was we staked in one of these erosional windows. So there's uh, there's a very young Columbia River basalt that covers a lot of this area, which also is sterilizes a lot of it. And where we staked and where Hercules staked are what we call erosional windows in there. So the basalt is for the most part eroded away, and the underlying stratigraphy is exposed, hence those silver showings in the rhyolites and stuff because the basalts are on top of the rhyolites. So with all the staking, Barrick staked I would say 50% of their ground. And it's not hard to figure out. You can just go open a map and click on Columbia River basalt, and you can see all the ground that they staked at where the basalts are. So, what we know now is the porphyry is in the Seven Devils volcanics. So you have so you have these really young basalts. They cap the tertiary volcanic unit, the andesites and the rhyolites, and then you have an unconformity, and then you go in the Seven Devils volcanics in places that can be, well, on our ground alone, that's about 1,000 vertical meters of stratigraphy. So add a thick sequence of basalt on that, which also masks your geochem. Barrick staked a lot of ground that they will eventually drop because it's more or less going to be sterilized. And they told us they're taking stream sediment samples in those areas to try and see if there's anything that comes out of those. But, that just makes, as I guess everybody knows now, Hercules had a lot of issues drilling because they're very deep holes.
Mhm.
Um, that just add another 300 meters of very hard rock on top of that masks everything. It's just makes it, it makes it not really explorable. So.
How do the malachite stained outcrops, as well as the historical lead and zinc mineralization, as well as you have historical silver workings, which is the initial thing that you stake the claims on, how do these things tie into the broader thesis of the region, though?
That's a good question, and nobody really understands that right now. So there's a number of, and Hercules included. You can see from if you time dialogue their Chris's podcast, you can see that his interpretation has drastically changed every time, and that's what happens when you find a non-conventional type of deposit. Um, but one theory is that those things are they're not silver only, they're silver, lead, zinc for the most part. So they look more VMS like. And that's why I said earlier that, one thesis was that this was a VMS belt. So when you're in a VMS belt, you would consider that when you have lead rich zones that you're distal from the main source of that, of the feeder zone of that, and the mineralogy changes as you get closer to copper rich, et cetera. So a lot of people thought this was a VMS belt, but nobody, because there's an unconformity there. I think originally Chris would have thought that when he had higher grade silver showings, that the copper zone was richer, but I think his interpretation has changed on that now. So the association with them is really unknown. They could be two completely, totally separate events, and that's probably how it is. So.
Hmm. I always kind of thought of Idaho as high sulfidation epithermal stuff. When someone pitched it to me, what's that look? How's that looking from your perspective and specifically on your package? I mean, is there potential
Yeah.
for a high sulfidation epithermal cap or something like that?
No, well, not that we've seen. Definitely not on our piece of land. We don't get any gold in the system there. Um, it's really silver, lead, zinc in those showings, and they're definitely, they're definitely more. They're not veins, but they're more tabular like bodies, which would again lead to more of a VMS style mineralization. We don't see anything there that looks epithermal. That's for sure.
I thought I did read something about quartz veining in your presentation, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the veining can be part of the porphyry as well, right? So, late fluid movement creates quartz veining, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's an epithermal type system. So,
Right.
a lot of I think in the Hercules stuff, you see the more intense the veining is in the porphyry, the higher grade the
Yeah.
mineralization is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but different style of mineralization. But any way you cut it, if you're going to find a mineral deposit, you need two things: structure, and you need lots of fluid movement. So that alludes to the presence of veining, et cetera. So.
What is the internal thesis on how the structural features that you've mentioned in the presentation? You talk about thrust faults and conformities, and you talk about the volcanic sequence. What's the internal thesis on how that controls the potential mineralization at Cuddy Mountain? Is it just exactly the same as Hercules? Is it different? Walk me through it.
Well, I mean, I think like I say, you can have a mineral deposit without it being structurally controlled in some regards. So, um, there's obviously, again, we're looking at a blind target, so we can only talk about what we see on the surface. So we see a lot of, we see a lot of structural complexity on our ground. We see a lot of cross faults, and we know that the unconformities there. We can cross right through it, but the unconformity is an age gap, right? So that's not a structure per se, and whether these structures carry down into the depths. We until we start drilling, we don't know. We think they do because that's what Hercules is talking about, that a lot of their drilling problems came from drilling into fault systems, which is probably a major structure that helped control the mineralization. It's a good thing, and it's a good thing from a developing a mineral deposit point of view, but it's a bad thing from a drilling point of view. So. You take the good with the bad. But I guess in short, on our project, when we see these cross structures, anywhere when we get near the base of that upper volcanic sequence, anytime we see map structures, uh, we start to see copper mineralization along those. We see, and our interpretation is that's fluids moving from depth, and that's leakage. So you're getting those oxide copper minerals showing up at surface with fluids moving around, and we know that copper mineralization. The malachite moves around pretty freely in the along structures. So our interpretation is that that's coming from depth, and that's a good thing. That means that in the Seven Devils volcanics, if we in fact have porphyry mineralization, which we think we do, we're seeing the signs that the copper is coming up from depth.
The way I understand it, so you need a source for the fluids to start coming out from. You need the faults to transport them, but then you also need to kind of receive them, if you will. So how's the package from a host rock perspective, as in the
Yeah,
ability of the rock?
you need a receptive host. That's the third thing.
Yeah.
And obviously, porphyry is a receptive host. So, the Seven Devils volcanic is obviously, I mean, I think at this point we know that Hercules has a porphyry deposit of some kind. The size and scope are to be determined, but um, so that's the favorable host, the Seven Devils volcanics. And when you're on our project, if and when I do my presentations, I pull up one of the Hercules sections and I show their drill section from the discovery. And basically, when you start in the northwest edge of our project area, which is about 1,000 meters above the valley floor, and you walk down the hill to the valley floor, you go through the exact stratigraphy that they have in their drill sections. You start in the upper volcanics, so you go through the rhyolites and the andesites. You see they call it the red conglomerate. It's actually it's not a sedimentary unit. It's a volcaniclastic unit. At the unconformity, it's a marker horizon. So we see that. Theirs is often like brick red in drill core because it's highly oxidized. Ours is at surface, so we see that specular hematite in there, that provides that oxidation at depth when the fluids are moving around it, and we cross through that, and then we get just into the top of the Seven Devils volcanics. So, and then they show these in their sections pink quartz porphyry dikes. We see two of those exposed on our ground that have chalcopyrite mineralization. So their interpretation is those are later dikes that are still mineralized, but not as mineralized as the porphyry. And whether they're dikes or sills or something else, we're not sure at this point. But certainly the ones exposed on our ground look like they could be larger dikes. But the point is, we have the exact same situation happening as their drill section. And as we get to the top of the Seven Devils volcanics, that's when we see a lot more copper mineralization coming up along faults and structures.
Hmm. Well, so if you lump everything together that you've done this year, which was property-wide soil samples, ground magnetics, some mapping as well, some grab samples, you lump that all together, and the collective signature of what you're seeing compares very well to what Hercules saw before they drill it. I'm trying to translate it to my 70 IQ of a brain. So is that about right?
Well, different because on the Hercules ground, they don't actually have the Seven Devils volcanics exposed. They have that they're in the overlying volcanics. So they didn't have, other than they also get some copper showings on their ground, but other than drilling a deep hole, they wouldn't have discovered that because they don't have and we wouldn't have known this, you know other than our mapping, we would have known the Seven Devils volcanics is there, but we wouldn't have known that hosts the porphyry mineralization because again, they don't get right into it in the Seven Devils. It's just below. It's below the top of it. So I guess the advantage that we think we have is that we'll be drilling much lower down in the stratigraphy,
Hmm.
so that we're not drilling through 400 meters of volcanics before we're getting to the target zone. We're going to be drilling 100 meters before we get to our target zone. So that's a nice bonus.
So the IP that you did, you didn't have to do it too deep either, then I assume.
We did do it as deep as possible. But and in hindsight, um, when we're in the northeast section of our property, we're 1,000 meters above the Seven Devils volcanics. So we're never going to see we're never going to see the target zone if it's beneath that part of the property. We're
Mm,
never going to see a target there because it sees about 500 meters deep maximum for the lines
right.
we did. For say, let's say 400 average. So, um, so I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, in the northeast corner of my property, you're not going to see an IP anomaly that's not something that's structural or, you
Mm,
know, you're not going to see that deep IP anomaly because we don't see deep enough.
yeah. Well, what's that? The fact that you have the seven devils volcanic, say that 5 times fast. But the fact that you have that on your property, what is that? Is that telling you something about the potential ore body that you, and this is very forward looking that we're talking about here, but is that telling you something about the potential ore body that you're again potentially sharing with Hercules?
Nothing. I mean, it's just we have that because we come down into the Cuddy Mountain Valley, we just have that erosional window there that's eroded down to the top of the Seven Devils. And obviously, aside from the minor amounts of copper mineralization that we see on surface and the rocks and along these structures, there's no there's no I guess there's no way to see the porphyry. It's our porphyry that's not sticking out on our ground, and it's the only strategic advantage we have is that we're drilling lower down in the stratigraphy.
Hmm.
And we also don't really know, other than what we see exposed, the extent of the Seven Devils volcanics on our ground because, um, I assume it goes undercover to the northeast, but we really don't know because again, the geophysics don't really allude to that. So
Hmm. Does that change anything in terms of well, that doesn't, or maybe it could have like millions of years ago, but the topography, is the topography in your package any different than what they have?
like I say, it's we cut down through the valley, so it's vastly different. It's very steep. We kind of what we call the benches. You walk from the northeast to the down into the valley through these benches.
Oh, okay.
But if you want to come from the south side of our property and go down, it's like probably a 70-degree slope. So it's very steep.
Oh, okay. And then theirs is, I could probably look this up actually.
Theirs
Most,
is more rolling topography because they are just up in that upper sequence of volcanics. So aside from, when they get like Great Creek or something like that, which is obviously a major structure, aside from when they get that, it's clearly very different topography. And there's a really great if you're ever to come out there, you can go. There's a vantage point on Cuddy Mountain, and you can stand at the peak of Cuddy Mountain, and you can look down onto our project. You can look down onto Hercules. You can look onto Scout all at the same time. So it's really great
hmm.
vantage point.
Would that make your drilling more expensive than theirs on a per meter basis?
Why? I think
Sounds
our
harder
drilling
to
will
drill.
be. Well, no, I mean we build access and then we drive down to the drill pad. So again,
Hmm.
we're drilling shorter holes than them. I mean I think it's going to be cheaper. We're both making roads either way. So we have an existing trail that goes down from the northeast to the southwest already that kind of connects some of those historic silver showings. So we're just really reactivating that and putting our drill pads close to that. So no, I think actually be cheaper for us.
Have you gotten any offers on or put out a request for an offer from a drilling company?
No, not yet. Until we have our drill permits in hand, and that's the next step.
Yeah, I do want to talk about drill permits here in a second, but then I assume before that you're just gonna announce or do a news release on all the work that you did in 2024 that I said with the IP and everything. When do you think that news release is gonna come?
Yeah, we have our news releases queued up to start. So we're going to have a bit of an update next week, and then we will start releasing the data um, kind of on a weekly basis thereafter, kind of through to the middle of March. And we're also going to start strengthening our board or changing our board and adding some board members. So, and some strategics on the consulting side. So, part and parcel of both developing and drilling this asset, but also we're also looking at a whole number of other assets because we're, right now Zeus is a bit news starved. Um, we've been, or I've been evaluating a number of primarily copper assets in the US so that we'd like a number of things that we'd like to try to add to our portfolio so that we can have, uh, the chance of finding multiple deposits, not just one.
Hmm. So you're gonna be news releasing throughout March. When is the actual drill plan gonna come in? Then I suppose that is dependent on when and if you get the permits then.
Yeah, we've already met with, it's a Forest Service situation there. So we've already met with Forest Service and we're just filing the final category. We're flying as a plan of operations. We're filing what's called a categorical exclusion. So that just means less than 1 mile uh, of road building or pad building. So it's limited to a size and a time frame, whereas plan of operations is much larger and have a number of you can put hundreds of drill holes if you want. It's not limited to the amount of reclamation needed. So the reason we do categorical exclusion is it's a slightly easier to get. It's a shorter time frame, and really I need to put some holes into the target. And if I have the chalcopyrite rich portion of the system, then we're off to the races. If we have masses of pyrite, then we're dead. So again, though, I alluded to at the beginning of this is it's one of the things I really like about this project is we're either going to know that we're onto a deposit or we're not very quickly. So you're not going to meet with me in 5 years and I'll be talking about some geochem results from the project area or something. It's like, either we're drilling into a porphyry here or we're not. And if we're not, we're done. So it's a very, very cut and dry project. And that's why I think we need to get a number of other projects into the mix here so that we're not just completely tied to this.
Hmm. Unless you spend some time in Vancouver, in which case you're going to figure out that you push this as far out as possible because you have a big discovery next to you.
I don't want to do that.
Well, that's good. Because that's part of my questioning arsenal, if you will, is are you going to drill to kill? Like if nothing comes up on the first pass drill program, how do you know when to stop? Like what would be a success on the first drill program versus what would tell you, we drilled it, we killed it, we move on.
Well, like I say, if we get, and Chris made this joke in one of his podcasts. IP stands for indicates pyrite, and so if again if we I think we're comfortable that we're going to hit the porphyry, but we don't know if it's mineralized or where we are in the system. And so if we hit a pyrite rich part of that system, it's obviously not very good. But I'd like to drill 8 to 10 holes to make sure it's killed. But that, if we miss on those, I can assure you that I won't be spending any more money on that property.
8 to 10 holes. That's you already know you want to do that. Like that's what you're kind of committing to. You're saying not too deep. What kind of average depth are we thinking here?
Well, everybody asked me this question, and our target zone is kind of in the 1 to 300 meters area, so where we see an IP anomaly associated with the Seven Devils volcanics. So, we go and drill. The obvious parts of that are throughout the Seven Devils volcanics, and if we hit, we're going to take the hole to maximum depth because the other thing we've learned from the Hercules drilling is they obviously haven't drilled out of the mineralization yet. So, if we get mineralization, which the nice part about drilling a porphyry or a copper-rich system is if you don't see the sulfides, you you don't have mineralization. So it's a pretty easy one at the beginning, and it's also fairly easy to tell what's 1% versus 0.1%. So it's basically just a function of how much sulfide you have. So if we're in a rich part of the porphyry, we're gonna I'll drill till the drill can't drill anymore, and that's what you do. And at that point I wouldn't be worried about money because I know I could raise more money because I'm have made a porphyry discovery. So
Yeah, the best thing about a porphyry is that most of the times it's not there, so you don't waste too much time looking for it. Which could also be the worst thing about it. How much is Hercules paying per meter drilled? Do you know that off the top of your head?
I don't know. I don't have that number.
Any good feeling expectation as to what it might be for you?
I
I'm
just know for myself from running programs in the US in the last few years that we're paying somewhere around $600 a meter all up. So that's your geologist costs, your assays, everything. So
Mhm.
somewhere in there, it can be as high as eight and it can be as low as four. Um, they use Scouts drill the first year, which is a pretty small drill and it's not too expensive. So I think their cost was fairly cheap. And then this year when you drill a 600-meter hole and you lose the hole, their average cost has got to be pretty high right now,
Mhm.
I'm guessing. So
10 holes, 300 meters, 3,000 meters. If it's 400, it's 1.2 million. If it's 800, it's 2.4 million is what you're going to need for the drill program, essentially.
yeah,
Um,
I tell everyone that obviously we don't have the money to go drilling. Once we raise the money to go drilling, we got to raise 4 or 5 million. I'd like to raise $5 million so that it gives me the flexibility to, if I'm onto it and I'm, what you do in these types of scenarios is if I drill a hole into the porphyry, I could do a fan off the same pad, and not change any of the parameters of my permit. So.
right. Yeah. How do you finance this is kind of the main question here for me too. I mean, whether it's 3.5 or 5 million is less important, but how you do it may be more important. So talk to me about that. Are you thinking of, I don't know, finding a JV partner, finding a strategic for an equity deal, just going for a broker deal? What's available to you at this time?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not quite there on that yet, but obviously everything's on the table at this point. Obviously, having a bunch of strategics in the data room alludes to the fact that we'd love to have a strategic because that would be a great lead order to help our financing. Barring that, this is one of the reasons why I'm also strengthening the board, bringing on some different guys and adding some different properties to the mix here so that we become a more attractive company that's looking to become a serious copper a player in the copper space. So
But that's strictly from an equity perspective, as you're looking for an equity partner, not necessarily looking for an asset level partner, or are
yeah.
you?
Again, it would have to be, we'd have to, obviously, as I mentioned, I don't have a deal on the table, so I can't answer that. But uh, if it was a small piece of at the partnership level and it came with a bunch of equity, we would consider it, of course. I mean, you would have to. I'm not going to give up the project before I drill it, but if someone's going to put in the drill money, then they want a little piece of the action. I'm not opposed to that. So, but again, we don't have those deals on the table, so at this point we'll have to consider everything, right?
Yeah. Well, we're looking, it's way forward looking. I mean, this is a very early stage exploration story. Like the most important part from this conversation for me is the conversation itself and literally having spoken to you. But what is little? I mean, you say if someone wants a little piece of the project, I mean, is 25% little? Is that too much at this stage?
Well, I think the industry standard is what people think is kind of 19.9 maximum, and then if you want to go beyond that, there's got to be some maximum. So if under 10% would also be
Hmm.
great. Um, like I say, until somebody makes us an offer, we can't make that
Hmm.
decision. But we're definitely not interested in giving up 49% for a little bit of drill money. We'll just go raise it ourselves.
Right. Well,
Because
that right
again, that's
there.
the whole reason why you become in the junior space is to make a discovery and be the one who wins. So, and by winning, that helps us raise more money. It helps us get a stronger shareholder base and go forward.
Hmm.
So I mean that's always the goal. If we were going to give this up, we would have just the private guys would have just fended it. I mean, like Hercules offered a cash deal to the private group before we even put it into Zeus. So
Why they turn that down?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think again, they thought that if Hercules obviously liked that property that much, then everyone could do a lot better putting it into a pubco and making the discovery ourselves. So
That's fair. That is actually a good approach, and I'm happy you think about it that way because it is too many companies that would give away a lot of upside right now for security, as in, knowing that you have drill money going forward. But it seems like it should be doable, at least for the size of program that you want to do here. That's you're talking about raising 4 to 5 million bucks. I assume you're thinking that that would cover your G&A as well. What are you budgeting for G&A in 2025?
yeah, well, I mean, you ran the numbers there. Like, depending on where we are in the cycle with some of these guys, obviously we did do some marketing last year that was, all for naught, and that unfortunately, I'm a geologist, and I come in running a company, and I just don't the whole marketing part of it to me is really you go to I went and did the TSX and the CSE course, and they tell you you got to market because it's essential part of it, but then they don't want you to market because they don't like it, and then how to navigate through this world is it's not the part of the world that I know, so it's part of the business that I hate, quite honestly. Um, but yeah, so I guess to answer your question, like we always use $1 million is the number for the year, but it could be a little bit higher or a little bit lower depending on what marketing and how, if we're onto something, obviously I'm going to be, I mean, you saw me in Frankfurt, so I'm going to be on the road and telling the story, because there's no other, I like the one-on-ones much better than, than doing any of this other stuff. So, it's really, I like looking people in the eyes and talking to them and talking about their experiences and what they think, so. And then back to the financing part of it, which you also mentioned at the beginning of the show is, the biggest thing that I hear when I'm out meeting with people is the overhang on the warrants. So like right now we have you know part of our I think we have a really strong partnership with the guys at Haywood, David Elliott, who's in the Mining Hall of Fame, is an amazing guy, Andrew Williams, and they've financed basically everything I've been a part of, uh, since I left Apex. And when I was at Apex, I used to help them by doing a little bit of due diligence here and there as well. So those guys are going to exercise a bunch of those 15-cent warrants, so that we can start instead of doing a financing, to allow me to go look at all these other projects and do some things. We're going to get a bunch of those exercised through our core group that was the staking group originally, and through the Haywood guys, as an interim financing, instead of going and adding more, doing another financing and getting more warrants out there. So we're trying to clean that up. But those, from the original financing, those 50-cent warrants, if they were all taken down, that's $3 million. So that really gets us a long way at this point. So we're working on that.
So just those warrants. I mean, not all, or are you talking about all warrants would be 3 million bucks?
So the warrants from the first financing we did are 20 million warrants at 15 cents. So
Yep.
that's $3 million. There's
Yep.
another set at 35 that obviously are not in the money. So they're not, I'm not discussing those right now, but I think it's attainable for us to get a good portion of those 15 centers taken down, and then we don't have this perceived overhang that everyone, and I can easily get, it's the original vendors have a bunch of the 6-cent ones, and I can easily get those taken down as well. So we're going to clean that up, so that cleans up our share structure.
What's your timeline for having the share structure cleaned up, as you just mentioned? Like, do you want to have it cleaned up before the drill program? So we're talking kind of this summer-ish, or when do you want to have it cleaned up by?
Well, I think we need some catalysts. We need our data out there, and we need maybe another acquisition to start to get more eyes on the stock, to get the stock trading a bit, so that I can go to a lot of the shareholders that, and I know most of them. I can go to them and say, hey, would you mind taking down some of your 15-cent warrants? And they're for the most part, they're all guys that will do it. So,
Hmm.
um, I don't know every shareholder, but I know most of them. So right now, we're going to well, this week I think we have about $400,000 in those warrants that got exercised. So um, and then a group of the underlying guys have agreed to exercise those 6 cent warrants to clean those out as well. So
Good. That's good. That's good work. But
which
because
also puts money in the bank for us to,
right.
and again, instead of adding, if I do go and do a $500,000 financing as a patch job before I go raise my drill money, then I end up with another warrant because no one's going to do it without a warrant these days. The market's just not that frothy.
I like to believe that sometimes it still can, but again, it's still drill dependent. But to your point, that's what I was going to say is that because essentially this puts money in your pocket. So if on the off chance, I suppose the permit is slowed down or it doesn't come in as quickly as you want it to, you don't have to go and raise capital with these prices. Like you can keep the lights on for a couple of months as you're going through the permitting and planning process. Essentially, that's what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the way we looked at it as well. So,
Mm.
um, and like again, because we have strong support, it's I can go to those guys and say, what do you think about this idea? Why don't we take down some warrants instead of doing financing? And they were all like, that's a great idea. Like, we'll do some right away. So
Mm. Well, what else should we talk about the permits when it comes down to the permits? How is is there an environmental review process next to because you're dealing with the BLM as you mentioned, but from the perspective of birds and mountain fishes and whatever you might have, how's that?
yeah, so they're doing their initial scoping right now, and as part of that, they identify within our area what the possible issues could be, and then we actually, and I've been doing this in other companies that I was involved with, and we'll do that with Zeus, is we go to them and we offer to bring in external consultants to do these studies to speed everything up, so that
Mm.
we're not waiting to because the Forest Service can be really slow. So we're not waiting and 100% relying on them, and they like that because it takes the burden off of them. So, we usually have to do an archaeological study, and then again, depending on what we might have in that area, you have to do some other studies. And there's a few good things that happened there recently that not good not by everyone's perspective, but there was a massive forest fire there 3 or 4 years ago, and it everything's burnt. So
Mm.
it eliminated a lot of the issues that could come up with trees and that sort of thing. So
Mm.
we don't, we've had initial meetings with them, and we don't foresee any. We don't see any major stumbling blocks in that area. Like we don't have sage grouse and all this sort of stuff. Um, it just becomes a normal process. The environmental aspect of that is a small component, but it's nothing like the NEPA process or anything. It's a
Right.
much scaled down version.
And there's also no local groups that you have to go and talk to separately, right? I mean, if the BLM gives you the green light, you just go.
They get once when the permit gets posted, there's a 30-day comment period for the public.
Mhm.
And normally that's luckily for us, because of Hercules' partner Barrick, they've been having town halls. They've been meeting the community there and explaining the process and how it works. So they've really done a lot of the legwork for us. We're really just a smaller version of what they're doing. I don't foresee any problems because they've been educated there by Barrick already.
Mm. It's been a while since they've seen mining activity, though, in the space, if I'm not mistaken, and it's never really been too large of a scale, especially with your piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I mean the the thing that people will have to remember is, even if, well, I mean, I think Hercules does have a deposit there, but even if that they were moving towards development, I mean, that thing is still, if they were really good, maybe 10 years from starting to put a hole in the ground,
Hmm.
probably more like 15. I mean, to be realistic. So, The permitting process itself, it's probably a 5-year process by the time they do because you have to have 3 years of water monitoring and air quality and et cetera, et cetera. So, I'd say 5 years is a realistic goal for permitting. So they wouldn't go into permitting stage until they had their resource into, partly into reserves, but all into M&I. So that's a lot of drilling and that's that could be 4 or 5 years of drilling still before they completely delineate the deposit, and then another 5 years of permitting. So, like I say, these people have to understand that the the mine's not going to pop up tomorrow. It's still a ways out.
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, we can talk about there hasn't been any mining activity recently in the space in that part of the state. On one end, it could be good because they don't have any environmental disasters or anything that they're afraid of that happened. As far as I understand, I mean, you can talk to me about that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Well, how do you move forward within the state from here on out? I mean, do you just do what you want to do at Cuddy Mountain, or do you try and get more ground outside of outside of what Hercules has gotten, or anywhere close by in the state, or anywhere close to your other project? How do you develop your presence in the state if that's even your strategy?
Well, again, by getting up with other projects or expanding our land package. I mean, we obviously are talking to the private groups that own land there. Um, but and that's be one of the what I would say I'm negotiating on 4 or 5 different things right now. And I don't have any of them across the line, but that would be one of them that I would say is it's had multiple conversations. So, again, right now we're just we do have 2 other project areas, but I would say we're really
Hmm.
the flagship is really mostly what we're talking about 99% of the time. So we need some more meat on the bone here, and whether that be a combination of getting more land in that belt, or getting other project areas. It's all part and parcel of what we're trying to do right now. So.
Well, why I'm asking how or why I was thinking about how to formulate my question with starting with the word how is because I'm thinking that does it happen now? I mean, does it happen in the next 2 months, or do you wait and see what comes up with the drilling at Cuddy Mountain or with the drill planning? Like, when is the right time to go and look for more projects?
Well, I mean, I think you have to be proactive. So for me, it's now, and because there's no deals happen overnight. So we've got to be always be looking for something to either add to the picture or something new. So that's just part of the business, I think. So and if we got some of those things and Cuddy Mountain became a major discovery, then obviously we still focus on that. So it doesn't really change anything, except hopefully it's easier to raise money.
Well, if it becomes something, then it's definitely should be easier to raise money. What are your holding costs for the ground that you have right now, and would if you keep expanding within Idaho, is Idaho generally an expensive state to hold ground in? How does that work?
Well, BLM claims are $200 a claim to hold. So at Cuddy Mountain, we have just over 100 claims. So it's somewhere around 30,000 US dollars. And then we have 2 other project areas in Idaho, as well with a number of claims. So I think our total this year was about 47,000, something like that. So, and it's a different system from other jurisdictions. It's just, you just pay that forever, that $200 a claim forever. Whereas, in Canada, you have to do work. And if you don't do work, you lose your ground. So, I guess there's good and bad about it. I mean, it's an antiquated staking system as well. So I think you're still going to see some issues. Well, Barrick staked over everyone, including us. So
Mm.
just on I guess just on the hopes that somebody messed up along the way with their staking or didn't properly stake, and then they'll take them to court. I mean, when we talk to the other strategics and majors, the one thing they do always tell us is we like the fact that you were there since 2021 because we know your claims um, aren't going to get contested. So, which is true. So that's one strategic advantage we have over some of these other guys who we know. And we had someone compiling all the staking in the background, and when they file, you can see when people overstaked, and you can see the timestamp on what they filed as their timestamp. So you can see, like as an example, just just south of Scout, there's a Rio block there, and that Rio block, Bear completely overstaked that as an example. But they missed by about 2 days. When you look at all the timestamps, Rio beat them. And that wasn't the same in some other areas, but that's a good example where Barrick, and when I met with Barrick, I said, guys, you staked over us. You landed your helicopter beside my geologist and then staked over part of our ground. And he
Hmm.
said, yeah, we're just going to sort that out. We figured we just cover everything and then sort it out later. So that's great if you have that $30 million to do that. But that's kind of what we figure they spent using a helicopter for about 13 months there. So we probably think between their holding costs and their staking costs, they're probably into it for about 30-40 million.
Staking sounds like a fun game if you have 30 million bucks, but what doesn't sound fun if you have 30 million bucks? Um, how do you see Idaho developing as a jurisdiction now with the new president in the US? Do you think anything is going to change, staking or otherwise?
Well, I don't know if you saw a news release today by Integra Resources. I don't know if you've heard of that company. It's a
Of
gold
course.
company in Idaho.
Hmm.
So Integra had a news release today. Uh, so Idaho announced this. Let's see, what are we at? Thursday. On Monday, the state of Idaho had an announcement. Yeah, so their announcement today was titled Idaho's Speed Act to Support Permitting Efficiency with New Federal Initiatives and reiterates the commitment to advance permitting. So so Idaho announced on Monday that they've been directed as part of the new government to speed up the permitting process. So for advanced projects. So there's an example where you know Idaho had a bit of a stigma because of Perpetua. It took them what are we on year 8 now that they've been 5 at least that they've been permitting to even get a decision. So they got that recently, and now this will really kick their permit into gear. So they're really saying that we're open for business, and Trump really wants people to buy local and produce local. So we've even seen this from the BLM point of view when they're calling to be proactive about things we filed to say, hey, we haven't heard from you in a while. Let's move this forward. Let's do this. So it really has flown downstream from Donald Trump all the way down that this is the mandate. So whereas I can tell you that wasn't the case with the last administration. It was quite the opposite.
Right. It's the multiple jurisdictions in the US are becoming very interesting to me. Arizona, Nevada, Idaho now with Hercules, of course, as well. So, how do you? And there's been a very good conversation. I want to work toward wrapping it up because I've already taken a lot of your time today, Dean. But how do you go and tell that story to the market? We can go back to talking a little bit about the marketing. You said you don't like to do that, but you're gonna have to. And you had a big marketing push, or big marketing spend at least in that quarter that I went through. It was almost 65% of your total spend. How do you balance that? I mean, how do you balance spending money and what do you spend it on?
Yeah, well, if it was me, I'd spend it all on the ground. But to run a public company, and raise money, we have to do this. So, I think I don't have a precise answer for you. Obviously, we need to do some balance of that, and I'm working with a lot of different guys, including our guys at Kin Communication that we use for our IR to try to find where the balance is for all this stuff and what we're going to do. And we haven't decided yet, but we're working on that plan. And I don't want to go spend all our money on marketing. That's not. I don't understand it. It's just and I don't think it often works. Sometimes just osmotically that when people start to like the story, that starts to work a lot better than the marketing, and that's the point we want to hope to get to. Yeah, so I don't have an exact answer, but yes, we have to have some balance, and I'm not sure what it is yet. And I'm working with people who do this stuff more than I do, and I think it's at some point in the near future, Zeus has to get an IR person as part of it on our board that helps navigate through this, because it's just really not my forte, unfortunately.
Nothing markets as good as a blind porphyry discovery, especially if it's a new
Yeah,
porphyry.
that's what I want. That's all I want, is make a discovery and then not have to worry about this anymore, and just be talking about how great our discovery is and how we're going to grow it. So
Mm.
I hope that's a conversation we can have in the near future.
A geologist's approach to marketing. Now that's a book idea right there. Dean, this has been great. I really appreciate your time. What did you come here hoping to talk about that I failed to bring up?
No, I mean, I think you really hit on all the points. I mean, I guess people need to look forward to seeing our news come out. It's positive. I think we have a great target there at Cuddy Mountain. I think one of our other projects has it has also a chance to have a copper discovery. Between strengthening our board and bringing on some new projects, I think I'm hoping that 2025 becomes a really busy year for us, and that we have a lot more to talk about here in the near future.
Great. It'll be great to catch up, and thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you.
And thanks to everyone for watching the CEO barbecue. I have a couple of more things to say before we go, though. The fact that this company was interviewed in here does not mean that they're necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone, but simply to ask a few questions. If you find that I failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know, and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview by asking those specific questions. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration development is an extremely risky business, and losing money is the norm and should be the expectation here. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, marketing ability, and many others, as well as other moving particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more. Again, it's very complicated and it's not for everyone. Moreover, these companies are typically in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which will sooner or later result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation, their presence on social media, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and told you about the stock, and really everything that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of this business, many out there might, and you should be aware of the inherent bias related to that. It is safer for you anytime you're watching or consuming any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased, because there will always be at least some sort of a bias, again, albeit clear off the get go or not. So always ask yourself, what is the incentive of your counterparty, and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true or not by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I don't have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits, so I should, under no circumstances, be considered an authority on anything, and you should not care about my opinion. Although this might sound amusing to you, it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, is at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know what's going to go up, what's going to go down, or what's going to go in circles. And none of us really know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success. Again, given that we're talking about high risk activities here, where most of the times it ends in failure. Also, unfortunately, try as I may, I'm not always going to catch all red flags or all challenges with the company. So even if I did ask a few tough questions, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving particles, and I am not always going to be able to catch all red flags. And on top of that, again, I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this content. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented does not constitute a solicitation of an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks, or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties and everyone involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust nor rely on me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research as well as talk to a licensed professional investment advisor. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. Setterplus.ca is where you do your research. That's where you find the company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze all of the official filings that you can find, with examples being the management information circular, the financial statements, the management discussion and analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical disclosures. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts and the best investors in this sector losing money are already extremely high, since this is venture capital. And again, it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."